The Winchester Mystery House, a sprawling, kaleidoscopic enigma of architecture, is infamous for its dark history and lingering shadows. Visitors come seeking thrills, yet many leave with stories of terror etched deep into their souls. These are not mere tales of creaking doors or flickering lights. They are encounters with the incomprehensible, the kind of experiences that crawl beneath the skin and nest in the mind. Emma and David were seasoned ghost hunters, their curiosity born not of folly, but a deliberate need to confront the supernatural. The pair arrived at the mansion on a cold, moonless night, joining a private midnight tour. The air was dense with an almost sentient silence, as if the house itself was waiting. The group, an eclectic mix of skeptics and believers, followed the guide through the grand front doors. From the moment Emma stepped inside, she felt it, a heavy, suffocating presence. David brushed her arm, his face betraying unease he rarely showed. In the maze of rooms, they came upon the Daisy bedroom, where Sarah Winchester reportedly passed away. The guide recounted tales of ghostly activity, the faint sound of a woman's sobbing, the inexplicable locking of doors. But it was not the stories that chilled Emma. It was the sensation of being watched. She turned sharply and saw, in the shadowy corner of the room, a figure. A woman, pale as bone, dressed in black mourning garb, stared directly at her. "Did you see that?" Emma whispered to David, who nodded, his face ashen. The figure melted into the wall, leaving only the faint scent of lavender and decay. In another room, David paused before a grand mirror. "This is wrong," he muttered, his voice shaking. Emma glanced into the glass and gasped. The reflection showed not their group, but a distorted, roiling mass of faces, mouths gaping in silent screams. One face pressed closer, a visage of unrelenting fury, as if desperate to escape. The tour guide's voice quavered. This mirror. Sarah believed it trapped the spirits of those who tormented her. No one knows why it remains here. The tour continued, but Emma and David felt as though they were being herded by an unseen force. In the infamous séance room, Emma felt a hand grip her shoulder, icy and firm. She spun around, but there was nothing there. The guide's flashlight flickered and died. The room plunged into darkness, broken only by faint, whispering voices. A single word floated through the oppressive air. The group scrambled to exit, but Emma and David found themselves separated. They stumbled into a narrow corridor, its walls closing in like a vice. The air grew colder with each step, and the whispers grew louder, angrier.
"I see you found your way in, just like all the others. They never learn. This house, it's hungry, you know? Hungry for souls."
Then, from the darkness ahead, Sarah Winchester appeared. Her eyes were pools of infinite sadness, her lips moving soundlessly. Emma tried to back away, but her feet wouldn't move. Sarah raised a hand, pointing to a small, hidden door. Then she vanished. They found their way out through the door, emerging into the night air, gasping as though they'd been drowning. The group was waiting for them, silent and pale, their own faces reflecting the horrors they'd endured. Weeks later, Emma researched the house more deeply. She discovered that Sarah had designed the mansion's labyrinthine corridors to trap the spirits of those who sought vengeance. The mirror they had seen was an artifact used in her rituals, its surface rumored to hold the echoes of tortured souls. And the corridor they'd stumbled upon, it wasn't on any map. Other visitors had reported seeing it, but were never able to find it again. Emma and David's story remains one of the most chilling accounts from the Winchester Mystery House, a place where the veil between the living and the dead is perilously thin. It began as a dare, a reckless challenge whispered among friends late at night. Thomas Keller, an amateur paranormal investigator, had heard of the demon house at 3860 Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana. The stories of possession, levitation, and inexplicable horrors intrigued him, promising a chance to capture irrefutable evidence of the supernatural. Accompanied by his friend Eleanor Gray, a skeptic with a penchant for adventure, and Marcus Lane, a videographer with a growing fascination for the occult, Thomas resolved to spend a night in the house. They arrived armed with cameras, recording equipment, and an uneasy sense of anticipation. For Eleanor, the house was nothing more than an abandoned structure, a place where hysteria and urban legends had bred an atmosphere of fear. For Thomas, it was an opportunity to uncover the truth. Marcus, though nervous, found himself drawn to the idea of documenting the unknown. Together they crossed the threshold into a nightmare none of them would ever forget. The house loomed before them like a malign sentinel, its darkened windows staring out into the desolate street. The air was heavy with an unnatural stillness, broken only by the faint rustle of dead leaves. A single street lamp flickered at the corner, casting distorted shadows that seemed to twist and writhe as the trio approached. "It's just a house," Eleanor muttered, though her voice carried no conviction. Marcus adjusted his camera, the red recording light cutting through the gloom. Thomas led the way, his flashlight casting a pale beam over the crumbling porch and peeling paint. The front door groaned on its hinges, revealing an interior cloaked in darkness. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something far fouler, a metallic tang that clung to their throats. Eleanor shivered, clutching, her jacket tighter as they stepped inside. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet, the sounds swallowed by the oppressive silence. Thomas set up his equipment in the living room, a space dominated by an old, tattered couch and a television long since gutted by time. Marcus began filming, his lens capturing the eerie stillness of the room. Eleanor wandered toward the kitchen, her footsteps hesitant as though the shadows themselves were watching. The first sign came as a whisper, a faint, sibilant sound that seemed to emanate from the walls. Thomas froze, his flashlight trembling as the noise grew louder, more insistent. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded, his camera still trained on the room. Eleanor returned, her face pale. "There's something wrong here," she said. "It feels heavy." Before Thomas could respond, the temperature plummeted. Their breaths misted. In the air, as an icy wind swept through the room, though the windows remained sealed. The whispering grew louder, evolving into a cacophony of voices, some pleading, others laughing, all drenched in malice. From the corner of the room, a shadow began to coalesce. At first, it was shapeless, a dark smear against the wall. But as they watched, it took form, twisting into a figure with elongated limbs and eyes that glowed a sickly yellow. Eleanor screamed, stumbling backward as the entity advanced. Marcus's camera whirred, capturing the unearthly apparition. Thomas reached for the crucifix in his pocket, his voice breaking as he recited a prayer. The figure halted, its head cocking unnaturally to one side. Then with a guttural roar, it lunged. The room erupted in chaos. Furniture toppled, the walls shuddered as though struck by an unseen force. Eleanor was thrown against the wall. The impact knocking the air from her lungs. Marcus dropped his camera, the device skittering across the floor as he scrambled to help her. Thomas held his ground, the crucifix trembling in his grip as he continued his prayer. With a final, deafening scream, the figure dissolved, leaving behind a suffocating silence. The three stood frozen, their breaths ragged, the weight of what they had witnessed pressing down on them. They fled the house as dawn broke, the first, rays of sunlight banishing the darkness that had clung to them. Marcus clutched his camera like a lifeline, though he couldn't bring himself to review the footage. Eleanor, bruised and shaken, vowed never to speak of the night again. Thomas, though shaken to his core, felt a grim satisfaction. They had faced the unknown and survived. The footage, when finally reviewed, revealed more than they could have imagined. Shadows moved where none should, and the entity's ghastly form was captured in horrifying detail. Yet, no one who watched the tape could deny the oppressive sense of dread that seemed to seep from the screen. Thomas uploaded the footage to his channel, but it was quickly taken down, flagged for graphic content. The house, meanwhile, remained silent, waiting, its secrets buried beneath layers of fear and time. Diane Wilson, a local historian who had researched the property, revealed its grim past. The house was built in the early 1900s and had changed hands many times, each family leaving under mysterious circumstances. In the 1930s, a reclusive man named Elias Harper lived there, rumored to practice dark rituals in the basement. Neighbors spoke of chanting and strange lights emanating from the windows late at night. In the 1960s, a family of 5 moved in but left after only a month, claiming to hear voices and see shadowy figures. The house sat vacant for decades until the Ammons family's infamous ordeal brought it to national attention. To this day, those brave or foolish enough to visit the house speak of an unshakable sense of malevolence, as though the house itself is alive and hungry. The Ammons family moved away in 2012 and reportedly never experienced similar phenomena again. The Demon House of Indiana remains a beacon for the curious and the daring, its dark history a testament to the horrors that lurk just beyond the veil of understanding. The Whaley House, a tale of shadows and whispers. The Whaley House, located in Old Town, San Diego, is one of the most famous haunted houses in the United States. Built in 1857 by Thomas Whaley, the 2-story Greek Revival-style home initially served as a family residence, general store, and even San Diego's first commercial theater and courthouse. The house is said to be haunted due to its dark history. Before the Whaley family moved in, the property was the site of public executions. One notable figure, Yankee Jim Robinson, was hanged there in 1852 for attempted grand larceny. Many believe his restless spirit lingers in the home. Additionally, members of the Whaley family themselves suffered tragedies, including the death of their young daughter Violet, which further adds to the lore. Over the years, visitors and paranormal investigators have reported hearing footsteps, seeing shadowy figures, and experiencing cold spots. These eerie occurrences make the Whaley House a popular destination for ghost enthusiasts and history buffs alike. It was a crisp October evening when Amelia Cartwright, a devoted historian and amateur paranormal investigator, arrived at the Whaley House in San Diego. The famed house, drenched in its Greek Revival grandeur, stood silent yet imposing against the twilight. Amelia had heard the stories, whispers of restless spirits, shadows moving of their own volition, and the ghostly echoes of a tragic past. Drawn by both her scholarly curiosity and a macabre fascination, she secured a late-night tour, intent on unearthing the truth behind the haunting tales. The house, now a museum, was eerily quiet as the last group of tourists filed out. The docent locked the doors, leaving Amelia with only her notebook, a digital recorder, and a sense of foreboding. "If you hear footsteps upstairs," the docent had said with a sardonic grin, "don't worry, that's just Yankee Jim checking in." Amelia chuckled nervously, clutching her recorder tighter. As the clock struck 11, Amelia began her exploration. The parlour's faded wallpaper and antique furnishings seemed frozen in time, their silence an oppressive reminder of those who had once walked these halls. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally loud as she moved to the dining room, where the heavy wooden table seemed to hold its breath. Ascending the creaking staircase to the second floor, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air grew heavier with each step, and the faint scent of lavender wafted through the corridor, a peculiar, almost comforting detail, given the house's grim reputation. It began in the nursery, a room steeped in an unsettling stillness that seemed to amplify every creak and whisper of the old house. Amelia stood by the small rocking chair, its wood polished smooth by time and countless spectral touches. The air was thick, cloying, and she could almost feel it pressing against her skin. A faint creak broke the silence, and she froze. The chair swayed gently, though the air was still. It moved as if an unseen force had casually pushed it, daring her to question her reality. Swallowing her fear, she aimed her recorder at the chair and whispered, "Who's there?" Her voice barely carried, as if the house itself refused to let her words escape. For a moment, nothing happened, and she wondered if her mind was playing tricks on her. Then a sudden chill wrapped around her, biting and unnatural, starkly contrasting the warm Californian night outside. Her breath fogged in the dim light, a visible sign of the icy presence enveloping her. She turned sharply, her heart pounding as she felt a presence behind her. The mirror across the room caught her eye, its tarnished surface reflecting something that shouldn't have been there. A shadow flitted just out of sight, too fast to be a trick of the light, yet deliberate enough to send a jolt of fear through her. Gathering her courage, she followed the shadow into the master bedroom, her footsteps hesitant on the creaking floorboards. Here, the atmosphere was oppressive, as if the walls themselves bore witness to unspeakable sorrow. The air felt heavier, and the faint scent of lavender wafted past her, a sickly sweet contrast to the dread building in her chest. Then it came, the faint sound of a woman sobbing. The mournful cries echoed softly, filling the room with a sorrow so profound it brought tears to Amelia's own eyes. Her heart raced as she ventured a whisper. "Violet!" she called, recalling the tragic tale of Violet Whaley, who had taken her own life in this very room. The sobbing ceased abruptly, replaced by an icy silence that was somehow more terrifying than the sound itself. Then the laughter began, a child's giggle, light and fleeting, echoing down the hallway. It was playful, yet unnerving, as if the child was amused by her fear. Amelia turned, her breath catching in her throat, as she saw a small, translucent figure dart past her in the dim light. It was a girl, no older than 6, wearing a tattered, white dress that seemed to shimmer as she moved. Her face was obscured, but the outline of her form was unmistakable. The girl vanished into the darkness of the hallway, leaving behind only the faint scent of lavender and a chill that seeped into Amelia's bones. Amelia's legs felt leaden as she descended the stairs, her mind reeling from the events that had unfolded. Every creak of the old house seemed amplified, each sound a potential harbinger of another encounter. As she reached the parlour, the grandfather clock chimed midnight, the deep tones reverberating through the house. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The clock had been broken for decades. A cold, almost skeletal hand brushed her shoulder, sending a jolt of terror through her. She spun around, but the room was empty. Her eyes darted to the study, where the door creaked open with agonizing slowness. Beyond the threshold, a tall, shadowy figure stood, its form undefined yet menacing. The figure lingered, an oppressive presence that seemed to watch her with unseen eyes. It exuded a palpable sense of malice, its mere existence a challenge to her sanity. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it dissolved into the ether, leaving Amelia trembling and alone. Unable to endure more, Amelia fled the house, the night air sharp and unforgiving against her flushed skin. She stopped at the wrought iron gate, her recorder clutched tightly in her hand. Her fingers trembled as she pressed play, desperate to make sense of what she had experienced. As the recording played, her blood ran cold. Alongside her own, whispered questions were faint, chilling responses. "Leave," a guttural male voice growled. A softer, pleading tone echoed. The voices overlapped, each vying for dominance, their spectral tug-of-war, an eerie reminder of the house's haunted history. Amelia's encounter with the Whaley House left her shaken to her core. The spirits she had met were not mere echoes of the past, but living memories, fragments of a tragic history that refused to fade. Even now, she cannot forget the house's whispers, its shadows, and the chilling laughter that still haunts her dreams. Later, research confirmed the identities of her spectral companions. The sobbing woman was indeed Violet Whaley, whose despair lingered after her untimely death. The playful child was thought to be one of the Whaley children who had succumbed to illness. And the shadowy figure? Many believe it to be Yankee Jim Robinson, the convicted criminal executed on the property before the house was built, his restless spirit forever tethered to the land. Amelia's encounter with the Whaley House left her shaken but inspired. The spirits she met weren't just echoes of the past, they were living memories, fragments of a tragic history that refused to fade. To this day, she cannot forget the house's whispers, its shadows, and the chilling laughter that still haunts her dreams.